So we continue with our series, Living to Eat or Eating to Live, and the second installment tonight is called Herbivores, Carnivores, Omnivores. Okay, what I want to talk around a little bit tonight is the issue, the debate over vegetarianism versus meat eating. Without getting into the minutiae of the kosher code and kosher meat preparation, I just want to talk about in general the controversy that's I'd say been popular in the Western world for at least half a century. And there's a big cultural divide. We know that Hindus basically are all vegetarians, and there are a lot of different reasons for contemporary vegetarianism, ranging from the moral ethical to the nutritional. So let me just start with a disclaimer. What I'm not going to do tonight is pretend to be a dietitian or a nutritionist. I'm neither one. I have absolutely no training. I'm probably a poster boy for bad nutrition. And I certainly have no formal training, and I can't really forward an opinion about whether vegetarianism is a healthier lifestyle, whether vegetarianism is a healthier lifestyle. Most people will tell you that there's much lower incidence of stroke and heart attack in the countries where less red meat is consumed, right? On the other hand, I know of several professional athletes who had their careers cut short because they were pure vegetarians. I'm not even voicing an opinion. I know there are these fad diets, the Pritkin diet and the South Beach diet and the Atkins diet, where they dafka want you to eat a lot of meat. So I don't know which end is up, and I'm not here to discuss that. What I want to weigh in on a little bit is the Torah view on vegetarianism versus meat eating versus everything eating. If time allows, hopefully we'll get to things beyond even meat eating. And in particular, I want to examine the sea change that occurred in the early generations of mankind. Suffice to say, on the first issue, okay, and this is definitely a layman's opinion, an expert's opinion, it seems to me that everything in moderation, that a balanced diet is best, and nutritionists of good conscience and good science can agree to disagree about how much red meat you need, how much white meat you need, and if you need it at all. But it would seem to me that if you vary your diet and you balance your diet, that's in terms of health, that seems to be the best way to go. All right. Here's where the discussion starts. Oh, I have a chumash already. Tell I have a little stage fright tonight, I guess. Okay, we're going to examine, basically we're going to be spending most of the evening examining 3 verses in the Torah, in the early part of the Torah. 2 of them are addressed to the first human beings, to Adam and Chava, we'll see in a minute. And 1 is addressed to Noah, the human who kept humanity going by him and his family surviving the flood, and parenthetically I might add, who kept the animal kingdom going by bringing every species of animal into the ark. And feeding them. Exactly. Okay, so let's take a look at the various psukim and the way the Torah itself talks about vegetarianism versus meat eating, versus being a carnivore. Okay. The first psukim I want to look at are in the first chapter of Bereshis, verses 29 and 30. Okay, we'll wait for it. Page 7. The third line of page 7. God said, "Behold, I have given you," he's talking to Adam. Actually, he's talking to Adam and Chava. There are 2 creation of humanity narratives in Bereshis. This is the first one. I guess it's instructive for a moment to look at verse 27 first on page 5. God thus created man with his image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Okay, so he's talking to a male and a female here, even though it says it in the singular. We're looking at the male and female as one unit at this point. Verse 29, God said, behold, I have given you every seed-bearing fruit, seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit, it shall be to you for food. For every beast of the field, every bird of the sky, and everything that walks the land, that has in it a living soul, all plant vegetation shall be food. Okay? So, God is giving a license over here, a permitted diet to humanity and to the animal kingdom. He says to humanity, you should eat every seed-bearing plant, seed-bearing fruits of fruit-bearing trees, right? And to the animal kingdom, he's giving vegetation to eat. It's clear, okay, that he is not giving the animal kingdom to man to eat. That's what we see in these psukim. And if there's any ambiguity about it, if you're not sure about that, here's my proof text. Let's move forward. Chapter 9. I'm not taking questions yet. Let's hear the basic psukim, and then I'll take your questions before I start the discussion. Chapter 9, verse 3. Page 35. Okay? The flood is over. Okay? Mankind messed up. There were 10 generations intervening between Adam and Noah. Mankind messed up. Noah and his family and the animal kingdom survived. They have now exited the Teva. These are the verses. They've exited the ark, survived the flood. These are the verses that Hashem is addressing to Noah, the new man, the remnant of humanity, coming out of the Teva. And he says as follows in verse 3. Every moving thing that lives shall be to you as food. Like plant vegetation, I have now given you everything. Okay? It's very clear that for the 10 generations intervening between Adam and Noah, I can't tell you how kosher they were. I can't tell you if they observed they were guilty of much more severe crimes than eating what they weren't supposed to eat. I'm not sure. We'll see what some of the great commentaries say, and maybe we'll have some inkling what the diet was of the first 10 generations of man. But in terms of a divine mandate, a divine diet, what you are allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat, now that you've come out of the ark, now you can eat meat, you can eat every living thing, like vegetation. In other words, up until now, you understood vegetation was your diet. You were exclusively vegetarian, and now that you've come out of the ark, now you can eat meat, just as up until now you were able to eat vegetation. All right? That's the rest of the class. The Gemara, the Talmud, in Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 59b, says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Adam Arishon lehuta leibasa la'achila. The first man, the first human being, was not permitted to eat meat. D'chsiv, as it's written, Lochem yeh la'achal l'chol chayas asar. For you it shall be to eat the vegetation, and to all the beasts, the animals of the earth. V'loy chayas haaretz lochem. The vegetation shall be for you, both of you, but the animals of the world will not be for you to eat. Ukeshabal b'nei Noach hit Elohem. When the sons of Noah came out of the ark, then it became permitted to them. Shenemar, as it says, Ki erek esav nasati lochem es kail. Like the vegetation, like the greenery of the grass, of the vegetable kingdom, shall we say, I've given you everything. I've given you all the animals. Okay, so this is not Rabbi Schwartz's reading of the Psukim. This is how the Talmud reads these two passages that I've just read for you. Okay. Any questions now before I start sharing with you why this contrast? Yeah? Okay. Oli, start. What's the question?
Prior to the ark, they only ate vegetarian? Yeah.
I can't tell you what they had. I can tell you what they were allowed to eat.
Okay, they were only allowed to eat be a vegetarian.
Exactly.
Prior to it. But after the ark, they could be
Carnivores.
carnivores.
Right. Also, yeah, I guess omnivores. Unless there's another category besides meat and vegetarian.
Could they eat
I don't know.
eggs, dairy and stuff? No, or are they just vegans?
Good question. I'm wondering more about fish. You know what? Let's wait for the speculation till we have a little more data in. Any questions on this, on just the verses? Or not? Okay, fine. All right. As a general Hagdama, because I think there's a key that unlocks the approaches of many of the great commentaries, I want to review with you. I think many of you who've been to my class before have probably heard this before. A pretty basic Kabbalistic concept, and that is something called Datzcham. Datzcham is an acronym for Domem Tzameach Chai Medaber. I know I even mentioned it last week, which means there's a 4-tiered hierarchy in God's creation. Okay, there is what we would call inert or mineral life. There is plant life. There is the animal kingdom, and then there are human beings. The Kabbalistic terminology for that is what we would call mineral or inert, okay, with no life force, no apparent life force in it at all. The Kabbalists call that silent, domain. Okay? Some of it is silent. Tzomeach means growing. Plants are referred to as things that grow. Okay, but growth, you ask a biologist, they will say that you have to study plants as part of biology. Okay, the Kabbalists made a distinction. The next tier, what we call the animal kingdom, that they call Baalei Chayim, things that possess life. So growth is not equivalent to life. A plant is not equivalent to an animal. It's a lower tier. Okay, and then the final tier, human beings, and again you could characterize human beings a lot of different ways. The way they chose to define it is as the polar opposite of the mineral, which was called silent. Man is called, humans are called speech endowed, medaber. Domem, going from bottom to top, domem, tzomeach, chai, medaber. Silent, growing, endowed with life, endowed with speech. Those are the 4 tiers of creation. Let's take a look. We're not going to be varying our pages too much over here. We're basically going back and forth between Adam and Noah. Let's go back again to page 5. I already read verse 27. Now I'm going to read verse 26. God said, "Let us make man with our image and likeness. Let him dominate the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock animals, and all the earth, and every land animal that walks the earth." Let's skip to, we already did 27, skip to 28. God blessed them and said, "Be fertile and multiply, become many, fill the land and conquer it. Dominate the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every beast that walks the land." Okay? Dominate them, but as we've clearly seen, don't eat them. Don't eat them yet. Okay. So, here's the thing. Again, I have to wax Kabbalistic, and I'm really a little loath to do this because any similarity between me and a Kabbalist is purely coincidental. But this is kind of low-level Kabbalah, and it's really, you'll see that in the more mainstream commentaries, this, even if they aren't saying this explicitly, this is kind of the underpinning of how many of them are talking. The idea is as follows. Look, God created everything for His glory. That's a verse, the psalmist says, "Hakol bara l'chvodo." Everything that was created to honor God. And there's no question that even inert things, inanimate things, also give glory to God. Hashamayim misaprin kvod kel, the psalmist writes. The heavens declare the glory of God. However, the true glory, the true honor that God's creation renders to Him arises from exercise of free will to fulfill His will. Ritzon el shel adam zui kvoda. The will of a person, that's how you honor a person. If you comply with a person's will, that's the way you honor a person. One of the baseline concepts of kibud av v'em, of honoring one's parents, is that you fulfill their wishes. They want you to do something, as long as it's not contravening something in the Torah, you should try to comply. That's how you honor your parents. One of the ways to honor your parents. So, the glory of God comes from the exercise of free will. Okay? If I click a mouse on my computer, okay, and the software that's running on my computer fulfills a command, I'm giving it a command. Copy, paste, delete, send, whatever I'm doing it. Has my computer honored me? Of course not. My will has been fulfilled, but that's automatic. That's something I've done for myself. Nothing has given me an honor. Honor arising from fulfillment of will presupposes that you've got free will. That you could have declined to honor my wishes, and you decided to honor my wishes. So ultimately, okay, when we say that the whole, you didn't get that?
No.
You don't see the difference between my pushing a button and on my fridge and filling a cup with ice, and my child bringing me a cup of ice if I want to,
Okay.
sip on a cup of ice.
I see
All
what
right?
you're
Okay. It has nothing, there's no glory to me, there's no respect for me, there's no honor for me. In a certain sense, I did it myself. Okay? All right. Now, since human beings are the only being, the only creation in God's cosmos and God's creation that are free will endowed, so ultimately the glory of God arises from us, from human beings. Okay. As such, say the Mukubal, say the Kabbalists. Okay? When man, and you see, this is the prime directive. Let us make man in our image, and what's the first thing on God's mind? Let him dominate the earth. Let him be fruitful and multiply and fill up the earth and conquer the earth and dominate it. Okay? So basically, all the other things, the other three tiers of creation, Domen, Tzomeach, and Chai, they achieve their ultimate purpose through one of two interactions with humanity. Either through exploitation or through incorporation. Okay? If I, as a human being, use an animal, use a plant, use a mineral, okay, to serve God, that's the best thing that plant, mineral, or whatchamacallit, or animal could hope for, so to speak. Its raison d'etre, its purpose here in the cosmos is how can a human being who does have cycle, who does have a mind, who does have a free will, how can a human being exercise free will to use that thing as a tool, as a helper to serve God, to fulfill God's will? And the other way is through incorporation. Okay? If a human being takes this into himself, okay, there's a food chain, right? The plants get their nutrients from the minerals that are in the ground. Okay? They draw up through their root system, they draw up nutrition. They are tzomeach, they grow through incorporation of what's there in the ground for them. All right? A lot of modern fertilizers are nothing more than a chemist's hash. All right? Nitrates, and that's what you spread on the fields. You're sucking up minerals, you're sucking up domain. Okay? And that gets incorporated, as it were, into the body of the plant. Okay? Animals that are herbivores, that eat plants, okay, that's how they grow. They've now incorporated plant life into them, into Baal Chaim. It's another step up the ladder. Okay, some animals are predatory animals, and carnivores, they prey upon one another. Say for the kosher diet, that doesn't come into play too much. But suffice it to say that when a human being eats of a Baal Chai, eats of an animal, okay, so now all three of the lower tiers, step by step, have been incorporated and are life-giving and life-sustaining to the human being. So when the human being does a mitzvah, all right, everything that went into, that was incorporated into the human being, is considered a team member, as it were, and realizes its purpose to the human being. So again, these are the two approaches: exploitation or consumption / incorporation. That's how all of creation gives glory to God. That's how you have a hakol b'olach like that. Everything that he created for his own glory. The Ber Mayim Chaim says a very interesting thing. If you contrast the two psukim again, let's take a look. Just turn to page 7. Two words. It reads much better in the Hebrew than in verse 29. When God is talking about human diet, it says, it shall be to you for food. Okay? Now for every beast of the field, verse 30, it says shall be food. Why does it say to them for food? So he says, the Be'er Maim Chaim, based on this Kabbalistic concept, Be'er Maim Chaim says, because there's actually a kind of a magnetism. If you've got a human being who's got their act together, okay, a human being who's truly serving God with every fiber of their being, all right, it's almost as if the other three tiers of creation are drawn to that person, okay, not through exercise of free will, it's not a conscious thing on their part, but they know if this person exploits me, if this person incorporates me, it's going to be for the good. It's going to be for the greater glory of God. He cites Talmudic examples of certain great tzaddikim, righteous people, who never really, their parnasa, their sustenance, the food that they need to eat to stay alive, just seemed to come to them without any exertion on their part. He says, look at the first man before the sin, when Adam's will was more or less, Adam and Eve's will was consistent with God's will. They're placed in a Garden of Eden, right? Entitlement. We talk about the problem with feeling entitled in this generation. Who was ever more entitled than Adam and Eve? They had to lift a finger to build this beautiful garden. It was there for them. And all the fruits and all the trees of the garden were just waiting to be incorporated into Adam, because he's the ticket. He's the ticket for them to realize their purpose, so to speak. Okay. So the first approach I want to share with you is a very interesting argument between two great Hasidic masters, separated by about 3 generations. The Rabbi Ben Pshischa and Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin are both keying in on the same 2 words. The words are the very last words in verse 30. And here I think they have a slightly different take than Rav Kaplan. He says, it remained that way. Vayihi chayin, it remained that way. He learns it the traditional way, and it was so. Let's take a look earlier in the Genesis narrative. Take a look at verse 7 on page 3. Or at least Rabbi Kaplan's consistent. That's it. God thus made the sky, and it separated the water below the sky from the water above the sky. It remained that way. Take a look on the same page, verse 11. God said, the earth shall send forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees that produce their own fruits. The fruits with seeds shall be on the earth. It happened. Okay, I don't know why in one place he translates the same phrase in Hebrew, Vayihi chayin. It remained that way, or it happened. I would stick with it happened translation. Okay, we all say in Pesukah D'Zimra, those of us who daven the whole Shachris prayer service in the morning, we say, Baruch She'amar v'haya Olam Baruch Hu. Baruch is the one who spoke and the world came into being. That's how it works. Creation is, God speaks, things come into being. So, this seems to be a mitzvah. This seems to be, you have pre-existing things. You've got already fruits and seed-bearing fruits and grasses, and you're kind of apportioning them. Man, you eat this. Animals, you eat this. What are these words, Vayihi chayin?
They listen. They did what Hashem said.
What?
They listen. They did what Hashem said.
It should have been Vayasu chayin.
And it was.
And they did that. Later it's going to say by Aaron HaKayin, when he did the avodah, he did the divine service in the Mishkan the way he was supposed to. He didn't change anything. It says Vayas Kain Aaron. He did so. Vayihi chayin, if you look consistently with everything that it says before in Genesis, means it became that way. So, yes, what do you want to say?
Vayihi chayin means that they were created that way, that God made it so, not that they bowed to God's will. These were animals and fruits and trees, and the heavens separating, the waters of the heavens from the waters below.
Right.
It wasn't that they obeyed God's will, it was that God created them and that's
Right.
what stayed.
Exactly. But I'm saying it was the divine speech that made it that way. Before God said it, it wasn't that way. That level of existence did not exist before God said it, right? Okay. So why is that appropriate here when he's apportioning the different diets to man, and the vegetation is there already? Okay.
I see what he's.
All right.
I see what
Yeah, does everyone understand the question?
Yeah.
Okay, again, Vayichen repeats itself very often in the Genesis narrative. God said, let there be light, and it happened. There was light. God said, let there be a firmament, and there was a firmament. In all, God said, let the waters recede into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it became so. Okay, I understand. This is all creative. Okay? Here, creation is finished. The last thing in creation was human beings, without getting into the 10 things that were created at twilight time on the sixth day. Human beings were the last things that was created. Now God is commanding. Now God is assigning roles. Why, after he gives the diet, the human diet and the animal diet, which I'm not sure, not everyone agrees is even different at this point, he's apportioning diets. Why does the phrase "Vayichen" and it became so, and it happened? Why is that appropriate over here? You want to know for an answer? Or you want to hear what Rabbi says? Or you still don't get the question?
No, I get it. I was
Yeah.
going to try to attempt to answer.
Okay, but time is low. Let me say over this machlokes, then I'll be happy to listen to what you say. I've only seen the Rebbe Rabinim's vart in 2 secondary sources. Tzadok brings him unattributed, and Nachshoni quotes him. I haven't seen it in the Kol Simcha, so I don't know the greater context. I suspect that he's addressing a conundrum that I haven't worked out fully in my own mind, and that is, for immortal human beings, why do you need food altogether? All right? I mean, we eat to keep body and soul together. If we don't eat, we die. If we don't drink, if we don't hydrate ourselves, we die. Okay? Human beings are supposed to be immortals. What is the function of their eating? Okay? Now we touched upon this a little bit last week as well. But anyway, this is what the Rebbe Rabbinim says. This was still part of creation. He says, before God said that plants should be nutritious, they were decorative. They didn't have the power to give human beings sustenance. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm getting into the manna class. That's a couple weeks hence. But suffice to say, there's a very famous pasuk, okay, often quoted by the dominant religion also, that goes, not by bread alone shall man live. Anyone know the end of that verse? The end of the verse is, Ki al kol motzei pi Hashem yichyeh adam. It's only through what exudes, what comes out of God's mouth, that man shall live. Okay, and there's a lot of different meanings to what that verse means. But basically, the way the Rebbe Bino applies it over here is, until God said, this shall be the human diet, and this shall be the animal diet, and the words Vayichen, it wasn't that way. Plants had no capacity to give nutrition, to give satisfaction, maybe not even to give pleasure to the taste buds. I'm not sure. Whatever consists in food, this is where it happened. This is not just giving license to a particular diet. You should eat this, you shouldn't eat that. Before God says Vayichen, plants had no ability to sustain human life. Says God. Says the Rebbe Rabbinim. Okay? Because God didn't say this about meat, meat didn't have it. Until God, so to speak, changed the rules of the game. After Noah and his kids came out of the ark, meat could not sustain human life.
And they probably didn't.
It was only the plants, and only the things included in this pasuk that the phrase Vayichen, and it became so, refers to. So only plants could nourish, could sustain human life. Meat could not. It wasn't just a question of it being forbidden. It couldn't stand. Let me first say over the machlokes, the argument between the two rabbis, and then I'll take questions. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin doesn't like this approach. I read you the Gemara. He says the words of the Gemara, the Hasidic master can't argue on an open and shut Gemara or on Rishonim on the classic commentaries on the Talmud. The Gemara says that man was not allowed to eat meat. It doesn't say that meat wouldn't have sustained him, or that he wouldn't have liked to eat meat, or that meat would have been purposeless to eat meat. The verbiage, the precise words of the Gemara is, Basar loy hutar, l'adam rishon. It was not allowed. So don't tell me you couldn't sustain him. A. B. This is very interesting. There's a thesis on page 56b in Sanhedrin that says one of the classic commentators on the Talmud. I'm not going to go through his proof is a little bit complex, but he derives from the discussion in the Talmud that roadkill would have been okay. That the only thing that was prohibited to Adam and Eve was to slaughter, was to kill an animal and eat it. But if an animal died on its own, Adam could have eaten that as well. So why would he have eaten it if it's purposeless? If it's not appealing to his senses, if it's not going to satisfy him, if it's not going to sustain life, it's not going to be at all nutritious. So Reb Tzadok HaKohen doesn't even like that. So, but he's got to deal with the words Vayichen. How does he understand Vayichen? He says, he partially agrees with Rabbi Rabbeinu. He says it doesn't make sense that something that doesn't contain life itself should be able to give life. And this is where I say where there's a diversion between the way the Kabbalists look at the world and the way the biologists look at the world. Plant is a category of a living creature, if you ask a biology professor. If you ask a Makubal, that may be the scientific reality, but the spiritual reality is it's a tzameich, it's something that grows, but it's not endowed with what the Torah calls life. So something that itself doesn't have life, that should be life-giving, so to speak, that's a chiddush, that's a piece of news. God invested into the plants the ability to give life because they're not baalei chayim, they don't have chiyus, they don't have souls, they don't have life themselves. But animals that do have life, that they should be able to sustain human life, that was part of their very creation. When he called them baalei chayim.
Does it make sense or it doesn't make sense?
Pardon me?
You said doesn't make sense or it does make sense?
It's an argument between these two great Hasidic thinkers. What do the words Vayichen and it became so? What's that doing? And one of the approaches helps us a little bit to understand the difference between Adam and Noah. Okay, that's all I want to say over. What is the Vayichen and it became so? What's happening when it became so? Is it that nothing could nourish, could sustain human life, and therefore only the things that God said could sustain human life, namely plants, can do so until Noah? Or is it that plants needed a divine pronouncement for them to sustain human life? Meat could have sustained human life, but it was forbidden to him. He wasn't allowed to do it. Right? Doesn't mean that it couldn't have sustained his life. Okay, now I'll take a few questions before I move on to the next one. Yeah?
I think very simply.
Okay.
I'm going back to page 7.
Okay.
Where it says it remained that way.
Right.
It doesn't.
I'm not working with that translation. Forget it. If you're going to ask me a question based on it remained that way, I disagree with Rabbi Kaplan's translation. It's not it remained that way, it became that way. It's inconsistent. That's not what it means throughout the Genesis narrative. What? Vayichen, I mean, you have to trust me on this. Ask him. He's a native Hebrew speaker. Vayichen means it became that way, not remained that way. Am I right or wrong?
And it was, right?
Right. Okay.
It's an incorrect.
Right. I mean, incorrect. Who am I to argue on Rabbi Kaplan? But I think in this case, yes, Yochanan.
The thing is that on page 5,
Yeah.
verse 26, actually, whenever I keep quiet, you almost always answer all my questions.
Okay. Almost.
Except here.
This was an exception. Okay.
What's livestock?
What is what? Livestock.
What's
Domestic animals.
no. What does it mean?
In
What
this context, the Hebrew word behema.
And what does it mean literally?
It means an animal that is meant to be domesticated by humanity.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
Why is that what it means, or why does humanity have to domesticate
Why
anything?
in this verse
Yeah.
did we need to domesticate animals?
To plow.
That's the only exception I can find so
Right.
far.
To plow.
That's the only thing I can
How about to ride on? Maybe it's easier than walking.
maybe to ride.
Okay.
But we don't need eggs.
No,
We don't
maybe
need
you
milk.
don't know that.
Right.
We don't
That's
need
it.
any of these things
We
for
don't need-
1,000 years.
And we don't really need husbandry either. We don't need an animal
Correct.
schlepping a plow because our Garden of Eden is well stocked with fruits.
So why we need livestock? I understand the plowing.
But
And then
you say
again,
you
how
don't
much
need a
plowing
plow.
is how many of us? We can do it with our hand.
Okay.
We can till the soil. The soil is
For plowing,
rich.
you could.
Right? The soil is rich and the soil hasn't been cursed yet.
Yeah.
Also a good point. Okay, it's a very good question.
We can stick things in the ground. In fact, we don't even have to do that. It's already growing.
This is an excellent question. does it pertain to the question of diet?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so tell me that. So you want to say we have to domesticate birds to eat their eggs?
We don't have need for livestock,
Okay.
except as tools.
Right.
Except perhaps to till the soil, maybe.
Okay, to use my lingo, if they're not there to be incorporated into our bodies, they're there for us to exploit, then you want to know how we're going to exploit them.
Yeah.
Okay, good question.
And the animals.
But your conclusion is that we're exploiting them for their eggs?
Right now, I don't know what livestock means.
Okay.
Because it seems as if livestock, as I understand it today,
Right.
is not the same livestock we're talking about here.
Okay, very
The
good.
whole situation is different.
Yes. Okay, so just to answer you in a superficial way, so we can move on, I'm going to come to one or two conclusions. Either Adam needed to domesticate them to ride, or to the Gemara says that the fall of mankind was also the fall of the serpent. It says it's a terrible thing, because the ultimate gentleman's gentleman, the ultimate butler, the ultimate valet for a human being would have been a snake, an upright snake. It's not me talking, it's the Talmud talking. If the snake had not been laid low, had not been laid horizontal, if it was an upright, standing creature, it would have been the most wonderful butler, servant that the human beings could have had. However, that's not really, it doesn't address your question, because a snake is a chaya, it's not a behemoth. Okay, I'll tell you what it can't mean. It can't mean we want them for their eggs, okay, because, I mean, if you mean like eggs of fowl, chicken or duck eggs or turkey eggs or something like that, that's not a behemoth. Behemoth, that's an oaf. It's a different category in this verse. Okay, so some more comments before we move on? No, we haven't spoken about eggs, dairy, or for that matter, fish either.
I think you're alluding to it, but I think the whole idea of food is God is preparing man for when it's okay to eat food. Like we in the beginning, Adam and Eve said you can eat everything except the tree of good and evil.
Right.
We were probably able to eat that, but God didn't say you could eat it.
Okay, now, there's a difference between a positive commandment and a negative commandment. There was a negative commandment, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and when you do, on the day you do, you will die. Okay? This is only an inferred prohibition. It says you're allowed to eat all the fruit-bearing, seed-bearing things, right? I can infer from that, I'm not allowed to eat meat. But it doesn't say anywhere, do not eat meat. When you eat meat, you will die.
So God wasn't actually preparing even Noah, you could, until it was time for him, I guess he domesticated him, he said it's okay to eat him, now you can eat him. I mean, I'm saying...
Yeah, I have, all we've done so far tonight is, I've confused everyone a lot. I've accomplished that very well. Okay? I've done that, and I have pointed out that Adam was not allowed to eat meat and that Noah was. I haven't shared with you any of the classic commentaries as to why. Shall I do that now or take two more questions? No, let me take two more quick questions. Robin and Elise, quick, let's go.
In the text,
Yeah.
where it says that every beast should eat, plantation also. Where does it say, or doesn't it say that some beasts can eat other beasts? Because then you get into the whole survival of the fittest.
Excellent.
Big beasts.
I want to get to it. Okay, one of the commentaries, Malbim and Hirsch speak about that. Yeah, go ahead.
And the other thing, Noah was after the fall of Adam and Eve. I mean, if that,
Right.
So why would we even need this information unless Hashem was preparing us for that fall in the first place? That He knew that it was going to come eventually.
Is that a question or a rhetorical question?
It's a kind of, I guess, a question. I don't know. It's a little bit of both.
Okay. The shorthand answer to that is, and this is based on a Ramchal, on Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, I said over many times, that basically the whole regimen of Jewish history and Jewish destiny and the Jewish Torah is to get us back to the garden. It's very important for us to know the pre-fall state of human beings, because essentially that's what we're striving to re-achieve. Okay. I will tell you this right now, Rob, before I move on, that the eschatological, the messianic era prophecy of the lion lying down with the lamb and the leopard of the jungle eating straw, okay, so the Mefarshim say, the Rishonim say, that before the fall of man, animals were all herbivores too. Even the wild beasts that we associate with being predators and carnivores, and that's part of what I mean, this really segues to what I just told her. The same way humanity will be uplifted in the Messianic era back to the state that they were, the entire world, the whole creation will be the way it was before. It's not really a change. It's a return to what animal nature was like before we got depraved. We all got depraved. Okay, so we've articulated the question, what's the difference? Why was Adam not allowed to eat meat? Why is Noah allowed to eat meat? Now I'm going to share with you some of the classic answers for that. Let's go with the Ramban. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says two things. First of all, he says, you have to understand that even before any of this happened, even before the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, the expulsion from Eden, the first homicide, the degradation of human society until the flood, before all of that happened, there was already a difference between human beings and the animal kingdom as expressed in their diets. If you pay very close attention to the words of verses 29 and 30, okay? In verse 29 it says, I will give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. Okay, I'm not going to go into the dissonance between the English translation and the Hebrew, but suffice to say that Nachmani says this includes lentils, this includes fruits, this includes, according to the Targum Yonasan, it includes exploiting trees for their lumber. Okay. When it gets to the animals, the next verse, for every beast of the field, all plant vegetation shall be food. Things that we would call grass, weeds, hay. Okay. Animals are, forget about animals not being carnivorous before the expulsion from Eden. Animals were not supposed to eat fruits. You ever go to the zoo and the primates are all eating bananas and apples and so on and so forth, right? Or a koala bear, goes up the eucalyptus plants and eats the leaves, eats the little lychee fruits and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of animals eat fruits and vegetables. They don't just eat vegetation, right? That wasn't the original mandate, according to Ramban. Even before the fall of man, okay, the diet for a human being and for animals was not identical. Animals were not supposed to be eating anything seed-bearing. Grasses, wild grasses, stuff like that, fine. But fruits or vegetables that contain their own seeds, they weren't supposed to eat that. That wasn't the divine manner. Then he goes on to say as follows. And if this sounds like a lot of modern left-leaning vegans, so be it. It's part of classical Judaism. The Ramban says that there was a great degree of similarity between man and Medabrim and Balei Chaim, between man and the next tier of creation, because they have a slight form of bechira. They have a slight form of free will. Animals, unlike plants, have a survival instinct. Okay, to every rule there's an exception to the rule. I know about the lemmings, that go off the cliffs of Dover. But generally speaking, everything in the animal kingdom will avoid pain and will avoid death. They have an instinct to avoid pain. They will get moving to avoid pain and avoid death. In a certain sense, that's an exercise of will. It's instinctive. It's something similar to human beings. Therefore, says the Ramban, if you're similar, you shouldn't be preying upon one another. You asked if one animal preyed upon another animal. If you're similar, you should not be preying upon one another. Why, for Noah, was it allowed? Did mankind get that much better than the animal kingdom after the flood? I would think that the degradations of the generations from Adam to Noah meant we got closer to the animals, not further away from the animals. He says that may be true. But the fact that the animal kingdom totally owed their existence now to a human being, and the first time around, okay, volume 1 of humanity, God created the animals and they owed their existence to God. They didn't owe their existence directly to a human being. Here, Noah took the animals into the ark, fed them for the entire year that they spent in the ark. They owed the ongoing existence of themselves and their species to man. As a reward for that, he was allowed to become a carnivore. It really doesn't address the question of, well, why should things on the same level not prey upon one another? But it says that it was a kind of divine reward for the sons of Noah for what he did for the sons, the progeny, the offspring of all the animals of the world. Parenthetically, my question on the Ramban is, what about fish? Our tradition is that fish were not destroyed in the flood, and certainly not that fish came onto the ark during the flood. Now we know that we are allowed to eat fish. Jews are allowed to eat fish. Noahides are allowed to eat fish. That's not part of the Noahide kosher diet, that they shouldn't be allowed to eat fish. So what does this mean? Does this mean that Adam was allowed to eat fish? Or does that mean that fish may be part of the animal kingdom, but they're different enough from human beings that I don't know. I don't know how to address the issue of fish. You asked me about eggs, dairy. I don't know the answer to all those questions. It's a little bit nebulous. Okay. The Torah.
They used to say that the fishes are cold-blooded animals, that's why they're not eating.
Cold. Who said that?
I don't know.
What's the source for that? Urban legend. That's urban legend. Okay.
Cold-blooded animals.
The Torah says something very fascinating. The Torah says not only the license to eat meat began by Noah, but the yen, the taiva, the lust, the desire to eat meat began by Noah as well. And here's a third approach to the Vayihi Chen, and it became so. What became so? It became, we're not talking about the nutritive value of the plants. We're talking about humans and animals' attitude towards their food source. Vayihi Chen was a change in the way humanity and the way the animal kingdom approached plants. It could be that for the several seconds that intervened between the creation of human beings and when God gave them their diet, it could be that Adam, maybe he was looking around the animal and said, I'd like to kill that and eat that. Possibly. But when God said Vayihi Chen meant a change in human nature. Human nature became such that they had no yen whatsoever to eat meat. And the Torah says something again, this, in any extremist vegan tract, this would work very well. He says, Adam and Eve considered animal-side homicide. They considered it just as egregious to kill an animal as to kill a fellow human being. Now remember, they weren't the first murderers. That took another generation. That took their kids. Cain and Abel, right? Cain had to slay Abel. Before there was Cain, there was no homicide. Adam and Eve, says the Torah, when it said Vayihi Chen, they only had a yen to eat vegetarian nutrition. And the flip side of that was that they considered animal murder on the same level as human murder. That's what the Torah says. A lot of vegetarians today, a lot of ethical vegetarians still consider it that way, right? That's one of the major arguments. What right do we have to kill animals for our purpose? What right do, most of these people are not religious people, don't believe that the Torah is the divine word of God, and that, that's where their arguments stem from. This is a fairy tale document as far as they're concerned.
But there are,
Chas v'shalom. What?
yet there are religious people who are.
Yes, there are. Absolutely. I'm just saying, it's not a totally foreign concept. You see that there's something, in a certain sense, it seems to be an aspiration to a higher level of humanity. We want to get back to the garden. We want to have an attitudinal adjustment to be like Adam was before the sin.
That's interesting.
Right? Okay.
I'm sorry, who was saying all that? I didn't catch the second.
The Torah.
The tour.
Right. Okay. I want to finish this presentation, this attitude. The Ramban and the Torah is pretty much one school of thought with a very interesting insight into the Abu Draham. Abu Draham is one of the earliest commentaries that we have on the Siddur. And he asked the following question. Why don't we have a specific bracha for meat consumption? When we eat a fruit, we say Bayer Priyat, who created the fruit of the tree. When we eat a vegetable, we said Bayer Priyadama. When we eat bread, we say Amaitzi Lechem Minaretz, who drew bread out of the earth. Why, when we eat a good steak, why don't we say Bayrei Chayes Haaretz, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Bayrei Chayes Haaretz, who created the animals of the world? Because that's not what he created them for. We say Shakol Niyeh B'Dvarei, everything became through his words, through speech. But to say that he created them, right, for the purpose of our ingestion, in a certain sense, that would be a lie. There was an adjustment. There was a plan B that conformed to the new realities of humanity after the flood. But to say the words, to have the same matbeh, to say they have the same form as the other brachas, and to say that he created them for us to eat, like he created the fruits or the vegetables, that's just untrue, says the Abu Draham. Okay. The Abarbanel has a different approach. He says the difference between Adam and Noah was pragmatic considerations. Okay? First of all, Adam comes out of the flood, out of the ark. He sees a destroyed world. Hey. Noah, excuse me. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Maybe I'm Roger Clemens. Maybe I misremembered. I don't know. At any rate, be that as it may, Noah comes out of the ark. You're a geopolitics fan. I'm a sports fan. So we have different frames of reference. Okay. An adult should never admit this, but I could really care less about the outcome of the election. Whatever will be. Okay, anyway. Yeah, be that as it may. Who's going to win the pennant? That gets my pulse racing. Okay. Noah comes out. He comes out to a destroyed world. A. B. According to many of the classic commentaries, the whole concept of seasons begins after the flood. I forget who says this. If it's the Arachaim HaKadosh or the Svarnai, one of the classic commentaries on the Chumash says that the earth did not tilt on its axis until after the flood. The whole earth was equatorial, it was temperate, it was lush vegetation everywhere. People did not need warm clothing. Fruit was readily available. It wasn't exactly like the Garden of Eden. There had to be some kind of husbandry, but agriculture was a much easier field before the flood. You got to start dealing with winters or even falls and rainy seasons, planting season, harvesting seasons. If he comes out and he's got to be a pure vegetarian, he's going to starve. He's got plenty of animals available. He was told the animals start propagating immediately when they came out. For some, the gestation period is very short, much shorter than it takes to bring a wheat crop in or a barley crop in for the field, right? And besides, from the kosher animals, he didn't have a pair; he had 7 of each, right? So animal life was a little bit more readily available to him. But it's not just for Noah and his kids. That could be a temporary act. Okay, for you, for the first year until you bring in your first crop, eat meat. After that, the prohibition should go back. He says, no, there's a sea change in the nature of the world and the nature of humanity. Human beings are now going to have to deal with seasons, right? You can't always be a farmer. Sometimes you have to be a hunter and gatherer, or you're going to starve, or you're just going to die. Pre-flood man didn't have to deal with seasons. Post-flood man, not just Noah, but all subsequent generations have to deal with seasons. People are going to be flung now to the furthest corners of the earth. God sees the generation of the dispersion coming, which incidentally was really the fulfillment of the divine will that we read that was said to Adam. Multiply, be fruitful, spread out through the earth. Man was not supposed to be concentrated in one urban area. He was supposed to spread out through the earth. No, the earth has a lot of different topographies, a lot of different climates, right? And again, there are going to be some climates, tell an Eskimo in Alaska, right? You have to be a pure vegetarian. You don't hunt seal, don't hunt polar bears, don't eat fish. It's not fair. If that's the part of the world where they were stuck, how can you tell them to be pure vegetarians? The Tzvar Amar talks about the physical infirmity of the generations after the flood. Again, I don't have time now to go through all the psukim, but trust me on this. If you go through Genesis and Noah, you'll see that the generations before the flood lived 5, 6, 8, in the case of Methuselah, more than 900 years. Generations after the flood, the maximum lifespan was 120 years. At least overtly in Chumash. There are a few midrashim about people who had extraordinarily long lifespans, but the general rule of thumb was lifespans were cut extremely short. Okay? Obviously, it's a physical weakening of humanity. A physically more weak human being needs more nutritious food. Now again, I'm not getting into cholesterol, I'm not getting into salt content, okay? But in terms of calorie, okay, protein packs a much bigger calorie punch than non-proteins, okay? You eat meat, a little ounce like that, it's hundreds of calories, all right? So, meat is more nutritious, says the Tzvar. That's why mankind, after the fall of the flood, that is, the Malbim says, in one approach, he has two very, very conflicting approaches, the same commentary, the Malbim says in one approach, he's the one who says this thing about the far-flung nature of mankind, I'm sorry I didn't attribute it before, about people ending up in far-flung islands and very rough climates. And he also says that it's not just that meat is intrinsically more nutritious than fruits. fruits are inferior to the way they were before the flood. Certainly inferior to the way they were in Eden. We know that was part of the curse of the expulsion from Eden, that the earth shall give forth thorn and thistle, right? After Cain slaughtered Abel, murdered Abel, the ground was cursed even more. You're a farmer now. Now the ground shall be cursed. It won't give its strength, its power to you. And after the flood, things got even worse. The peiros, the nutritious value of the plants was diminished, needed some compensation. That's when meats came in. Okay. Now, I want to share with you also a counterintuitive approach. Everything I've learned, everything I've ever understood is, and certainly these commentaries I just quoted seem to corroborate this, is that mankind on a spiritual level at least, if not on a physical level, is on a downward spiral. We're devolving. You see this very often in Chazal, very often throughout the Talmud and the Medrash. It's a concept called hiskatnu hadaros. The generations keep on getting diminished. If the first people were like angels, then we are like human beings. If they were like human beings, then we are mere donkeys. A very biting epigram of the sages of the Talmud. So, how the Maharal and the Malbim say this, I'm not quite sure. But it certainly gives you a different approach, a whole polar opposite approach to everything we've been saying up until now. The Maharal, in his commentary on the Gemara, on the Talmud, in Sanhedrin, where it talks about meat being prohibited to Adam but permitted to Noach, says that the key to understanding this change in the various generations of humanity is another passage in the Talmud in Psachim, Tractate Psachim, where it says, Am ha'aretz asur lechol basar. An ignoramus should not eat meat. An ignoramus should be a vegetarian. Says the Maharal, and again, I'm saying many of these pshatim harken back to this four-tiered hierarchy, if you will, in spirituality and God's creation. Says the Maharal, the reason that an unlettered person, an ignorant person, shouldn't eat meat is because such a person lacks an inner spiritual life. Such a person is chomri. He's very materialistic. So why should he be anything above the materialistic animal? If they're not exercising their spiritual element. Biological life is something that we share in common with the animals of the world. What we have is a neshama Torah, a pure soul. Spirituality was cultivated through Torah study and through mitzvah performance. If you're an Am Haaretz, if you don't have that, then you're on the same tier, basically, as the animal. What mila, what relative advantage do you have over the animal that I should allow you to eat the animal? We all have a natural revulsion to cannibalism, right? We understand that we shouldn't prey on our own species, right? If you're basically just a higher animal, and again, I think this is one of the arguments that ethical vegetarians forward today, right? If we're basically just another higher animal, why should one animal prey upon another animal? Okay? But here what it says counterintuitive is he says an unbelievable thing. He says, Adam Harishon, Adam. The etymology of the word Adam in it is he was taken from the earth. His defining characteristic is he's earthy, he's material. So he's no better than the animals. Noah is called Ish Ha'adama. He's not called an Adam, he's not called an Adam, like a clod of earth. He's called a man of the earth. He lords it over the earth. He has an element that makes him higher than the earth. That's why he was allowed to eat meat. The same difference that exists between a Talmud Chacham, a person who studies Torah, and an Am Haaretz, and an unlettered person, right? He parallels that to the difference between Adam and Noah. The reason why this shot, it's very interesting. It's obviously a tremendously, diametrically opposed approach to what we've said everything until this evening. Everything this evening is, being a carnivore is no compliment, right? Either you're doing it because you're weak, you're doing it because you earned it, but you're really not any better than Adam, you're doing it because, whatever, everything we said until now. Now he's saying, no, it's a compliment. You're allowed to eat meat because you deserve to eat meat. Adam didn't deserve to eat meat, and you deserve to eat meat. You've got something about you that makes you superior to Adam. that makes my head spin, because everything I've ever learned up until I saw this morale tonight says that Noah is on a much lower spiritual level than Adam was. It's a constant degradation, and we're not trying to get back to be a Noahide. We're trying to get back to be Adam and Eve before the sin. But the morale says it, so I feel I have to share it with you. 1 second. 1 second. Okay. I'll take a question literally in 2 minutes. This is going to be the last thing I said tonight. I had a little bit more prepared, but let's stop here. If anyone wants to hear the rest, they can stay afterwards. The Malbim says something that again made my head spin. If I read him right, I already said his second approach. All right? The second approach of the Malbim was that Noah was allowed to eat meat because there were worse nutrition sources. The fruits got inferior. People were all over the world. That pragmatic approach. The first thing that the Malbim says is that Noah was a medaber. Remember, I started the class, I was calling the Kabbalist, Domem Tzomeach Chai Medaber. Noah was a medaber. Up until then, humanity was considered to be on the level of Balei Chayim. They weren't considered to be medaber. Now again, this also makes my head spin, because it says that when God blew a living soul into man, Vayi Adam Nefesh Chaya, the famous Targum Unkla says, Lo Ruach Mamalala. Man became a speech-endowed spirit. And even that, if that wouldn't be identified with what it means, the soul that was invested in man, okay? If there wouldn't be such a Targum Unkla, I mean, there's speech going on. Adam is talking to Eve, Adam is talking to the snake, Adam is talking to God. What in the world does he mean that Noah was a medaber and Adam wasn't? But again, these are great commentaries. I say it makes my head spin a little bit, but I'm just trying to share with you this idea that becoming carnivorous, rather than speaking to a degradation of humanity, may be speaking to a step up in humanity. Where the truth lies, or if these truths are even mutually exclusive, I don't know. It's one of those confusing things. Okay. I promised I was going to end, so I'm not going to talk about omnivores, and I'll take your questions now. You were first. Go ahead.
On page 35,
Yeah.
number 20, it says that when Noah came off the boat, he built an altar to God. He took a few of the clean livestock and all the clean birds, and he sacrificed complete burnt offerings on the altar.
Okay.
Prior to his doing that,
Right.
was there ever a sacrifice?
Yes. Yes.
When was it?
Cain and Abel. The whole fight between Cain and Abel was that Abel brought a sacrifice that was accepted by God. A fire descended from heaven and consumed the sacrifice. Cain brought a sacrifice of plant life that was not accepted by God. That's why he got jealous. That's the overt reason. That's what it says in the scripture itself. If you look into the Talmud and the Medrash, there are some other reasons given. But the main reason given was that's explicit in the Torah, that Cain and Abel brought sacrifices. And the Medrash, it says, based on a verse in the Psalms, it says that Adam sacrificed a unicorn.
Cain and Abel brought animal sacrifices?
Cain brought a plant sacrifice, Abel brought an animal sacrifice. Abel's was accepted, Cain's was not, hence the jealousy, hence the fight. Yes, Ms. Bennett.
The rest of the second part of the question
Okay, I'm sorry.
was, I thought that was going to be the first time that there was a sacrifice.
Okay.
And then further down, it says that God then gave Noah all the food of the earth, including the animals. I thought maybe that sacrifices.
Excellent. You were mechaven to one of the great commentaries. Who says this? The Rachaim HaKadosh says that because Noah had the sensibility to offer an animal as it were food or an offering to God, God returned the favor and said, you want to feed me with an animal, I'm going to feed you animals too.
But